Air Command and Staff College. He has served in Iraq, Germany, Turkey, and the Balkans. Lieutenant Colonel Kearn has received the Bronze Star twice. He retired in 2012, but continues to mentor battalion commanders and staffs on tactical and operational planning, as well as volunteering with the Riverside Mountain Rescue Unit. There is a more detailed bio in the program. Please read it. And it is my pleasure to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Kearn.
Woo!
Thank you. Please, I don't have to sing next. But Mayor, that was an excellent speech.
Yes.
Maybe you can go next after me next time. But thank you and good morning, Mayor McEwen, Ms. Polachek, distinguished guests, fellow veterans and friends. Thank you for attending today's ceremony and the honor to speak to you today. I'm truly humbled to stand before you, multiple generations of veterans and families, many with relatives or friends resting in this most peaceful place. Many of those buried here were tapped on the shoulder to serve their country in their youth and robbed of a long life of peace and happiness when they gave their lives to defend ours. Since 1973, for over 40 years now, our veterans have exclusively consisted of those who stepped forward and volunteered to do our nation's bidding. One such volunteer was Sergeant First Class Paul Ray Smith, who served in both the 82nd and 11th Engineer Battalions, units which I've also served in. On the morning of April 4th, 2003, Sergeant First Class Smith was the platoon sergeant of 2nd Platoon Bravo Company, 11th Engineer Battalion, the Jungle Cats, and was leading his combat engineer platoon in the construction of an enemy prisoner of war holding area for Task Force 27 Infantry, part of 1st Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division, during the invasion of Iraq that spring. That task force was in its 3rd day of continuous fighting and had the task to block Iraqi counterattacks against the brigade's flank after their seizure of the Baghdad International Airport. Sergeant Smith had begun the task of constructing this enemy POW holding area along the north flank of the task force's blocking position, totally unaware of an impending attack by an organized Iraqi force. While constructing the holding area, this enemy force of over 100 soldiers armed with automatic weapons, mortars, rocket-propelled grenades, launched a deliberate attack to destroy the task force forward aid station, also co-located with them, the task force mortars, and portions of Bravo Company 11th Engineers. Realizing the vulnerability of over 100 friendly soldiers now, Sergeant Smith organized a force of approximately 25 soldiers with a single Bradley fighting vehicle and 3 armored personnel carriers. During the course of the fight, Sergeant Smith positioned himself forward to control all the fires of all the weapon systems they had, which included small arms, grenade launchers, anti-tank systems, heavy and light machine guns. As the fight developed, Sergeant Smith braved hostile enemy fire to inspire his hastily assembled American force by going forward to throw a hand grenade and fire an AT-4 anti-tank rocket at enemy soldiers in a tower that was putting effective fires upon their positions. The Bradley fighting vehicle, running low on ammunition and having taken several RPG hits, withdrew from the fight, and another armored personnel carrier was damaged and their crew wounded when also struck by an enemy RPG and a mortar round. Fearing the enemy would overrun those 3 wounded soldiers, the remainder of the soldiers repositioning, and over 75 soldiers back in the forward aid station, Sergeant First Class Smith moved under constant enemy fire up to a .50 caliber machine gun on the damaged armored personnel carrier to engage the enemy, much like Medal of Honor winner Audie Murphy had done 60 years earlier. Fully aware he needed to protect the center flank of the task force, Sergeant Smith ordered another soldier to continue to feed him ammunition. "Every time you hear a lull in my firing, pass another can up the hatch," he told the soldier. With total disregard for his own life, Sergeant Smith maintained his position in the hatch without a gun shield and continued to engage the enemy. He reloaded the machine gun at least 3 times until all the wounded were moved to a safer location and the enemy attack repelled. While firing from the hatch, he was hit multiple times. 13 bullets were found impacted, lodged in his SAPI plate, that's his body armor, but he was mortally wounded nonetheless. Sergeant Smith personally killed between 20 and 50 enemy soldiers and stopped the assault. His selfless actions saved the lives of over 100 soldiers that day from his company, the task force's mortar platoon, and the forward aid station. And from this point on, the enemy would be incapable of continuing an attack into the northern flank of the task force. And for this, Sergeant Smith was awarded the Medal of Honor, the very first in that war. Numerous people have made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. Many in direct combat with our adversaries, like Sergeant Smith, or Private Joe Gandara, another Medal of Honor recipient, buried here in this very cemetery. Still, I think it's vitally important to remember all those veterans who are buried in this same field as our valorous heroes. Some passed from disease, others from grievous accidents in the air, on the water, under the water, and of course on the ground. Here in foreign lands, like those 6 Marines killed when their helicopter crashed in Nepal less than 2 weeks ago. In a nation whose youth are continually bombarded with only the most sensational stories, whether it be through movies, social media, or video games, it's more important than ever that we take the time on Memorial Day to extol our gratitude for all our nation's veterans who made the ultimate sacrifice. Last month, my wife and I were backpacking in the Grand Canyon and were surprised at dusk to see a young man alone come up on us while we were prepping some dinner. He was wearing a Marine Corps marathon t-shirt, and I did my best to resist making a Marine joke. When I asked about his shirt, Matt asked if I was a Marine, to which I couldn't help responding, seriously, I'm far too handsome to be a Marine. I'm an airborne ranger. It turns out that he had served in the Army instead, and after I made a joke about training the Iraqi Army, he said somewhat sheepishly to me, "You know, I never deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan." Incredibly, he was actually embarrassed to explain that he had only served 2 years on the DMZ in South Korea, no less. I immediately recognized that here was a young man who felt that his service somehow meant less, even in a country with an all-volunteer army where it is actually more difficult to get into the military than it is to get into college now. This man felt like his service was insignificant. Not to diminish the heroic actions of anyone, but with movies like American Sniper and top video games like Call of Duty, one could easily conclude that the heavy lifting is all done by bearded operators shooting terrorists in the face. And it's simply not the complete picture. I told this young man, "Your proximity to the tip of the spear in no way correlates to your importance to the mission." I reassured him of how valuable his service was over a bowl of chicken tortilla soup my wife had made and what could have been a canteen cup just like the one he had once been issued. And before he left to find a spot to bed down that night, Matt asked if he could hug us. Every man and woman who stepped forward counts, and may we never forget the sacrifices made by any single one of them that gave their lives while in uniform in any capacity. God bless every one of them. And thank you for visiting the cemetery today. Thank you for paying your respects to all the veterans that have died in service to our great nation. And thank you for keeping all their memories alive with young Americans today. Thank you.
Woo!